Good evening, everyone. It's time for our Sex and the City Book Club, Chapter 6. It is happy hour, and I hope you have your cocktails ready. Today, I have a mocktail that is like a mimosa. It's made with orange juice and sparkling caffeinated water in a passion fruit flavor. It's so good. I love these so much. Mocktails are fun if you're not wanting to have alcohol for some reason. Also, I woke up this morning feeling in a 70s mood because yesterday I was listening to all this great 70s music. So I decided to Farrah Fawcett out my hair. What do you think? It's it's my 70s look. All right. Let's get started, shall we? Chapter 6. New York's Last Seduction, Loving Mr. Big. A 40-ish movie producer I'll call Samantha Jones. Well, we get to see Samantha finally. Walked into Bowery Bar, and as usual, we all looked up to see whom she was with. Samantha was always with at least 4 men, and the game was to pick out which one was her lover. Of course, it wasn't really much of a game, because the boyfriend was too easy to spot. Invariably, he was the youngest and good-looking in the B Hollywood actor kind of way, and he would sit there with a joyously stupid expression on his face if he had just met Sam, or a bored, stupid look on his face if he had been out with her a few times. If he had, it would be beginning to dawn on him that no one at the table was going to talk to him. Why should they, when he was going to be history in 2 weeks? We all admired Sam. First of all, it's not that easy to get 25-year-old guys when you're in your early 40s. Second, Sam is a New York inspiration. Because if you're a successful single woman in this city, you have 2 choices. You can beat your head against a wall trying to find a relationship, or you can say, screw it, and just go out and have sex like a man. Thus, Sam. This is a real question for women in New York these days. For the first time in Manhattan history, many women in their 30s to early 40s have as much money and power as men, or at least enough to feel like they don't need a man except for sex. While this paradox is the topic of many an analytic hour, recently my friend Carrie, a journalist in her mid-30s, decided as a group of us were having tea at the Mayfair Hotel to try it out in the real world, to give up on love, as it were, and throttle up on power in order to find contentment. And as we'll see, it worked out, sort of. Testosterone women, foolish men. I think I'm turning into a man, said Carrie. She lit up her 20th cigarette of the day, and when the maitre d' hotel ran over and told her to put it out, she said, "Why, I wouldn't dream of offending anyone." Then she put the cigarette out on the carpet. Oh my God. Oh God, Carrie. Is this the Carrie they based this on, or did they just name Candace Carrie? Because it sounds like Carrie. It sounds like the Carrie Bradshaw we know, who was always so, thoughtless when it came to her smoking. I mean, she smoked everywhere in every situation without caring. I mean, she was always smoking and always in inappropriate places. It was kind of fun though, as a 90s throwback to when you could smoke places. All right. You remember when I slept with that guy Drew? She asked. We all nodded. We were all relieved when she had, because she hadn't had sex for months before that. Why was everyone relieved? What is why do they care what her sex life is like? Well, afterwards, I didn't feel a thing. I was like, "Gotta go to work, babe. Keep in touch." I completely forgot about him after that. Well, why the hell should you feel anything? Magda asked. Men don't. I don't feel anything after I have sex. Oh, sure, I'd like to. But what's the point? We all sat back smugly sipping tea like we were members of some special club. We were hard and proud of it, and it hadn't been easy to get to this point. This place of complete independence where we had the luxury of treating men like sex objects. It had taken hard work, loneliness, and the realization, since there might never be anyone there for you, you had to take care of yourself in every sense of the word. That doesn't sound fun. I don't know, it just is all this it took a lot of work and loneliness, and that doesn't sound like you did something special. Sounds like you tortured yourself for a long time to get somewhere where you could just turn your feelings off. Did that work out? I don't know. Because women are not built like that. That's just the way it is. Like, women are not built to behave like men. This is something I've been talking about in this channel a lot. Like, the whole trans identity thing is so misleading because a woman cannot be a man and a man cannot be a woman, and there are biological realities that can't be ignored. And women are really not built to have sex without emotion. It's biologically impossible. There's been studies done of the hormones that are released and what the love hormone, and I can't remember what it's called now, but there's a love hormone anyway, that releases in the female brain during sex, and it makes it impossible for there not to be an emotional connection. So good luck. I mean, you could keep trying, but it doesn't really work. They're fooling themselves, is what I'm trying to say. Okay. Well, I guess it's a lot of scar tissue, I said. Yes, so something you have to do to yourself over and over and over again to build up scar tissue, that's damage. That's damage. Well, I guess it's a lot of scar tissue, I said. All those men who end up disappointing you. After a while, you don't even want to have feelings anymore. You just want to get on with your life. I think it's hormones, said Carrie. The other day I was in the salon getting a deep conditioning treatment because they're always telling me my hair is going to break off. And I read in Cosmo about male testosterone in women. This study found that women who have high levels of testosterone are more aggressive, successful, have more sex partners, and are less likely to get married. There was something incredibly comforting about this information. It made you feel like you weren't a freak. The trick is getting the men to cooperate, said Charlotte. Are there men out there who don't want to have no strings attached sex? If there are, I'm not aware of many. I mean, aren't most men willing? What do you mean you have to get them to cooperate? Men in this city fail on both counts, said Magda. They don't want to have a relationship, but as soon as you only want them for sex, they don't like it. They can't just perform the way they're supposed to. It doesn't sound like the men I know. Just Have you ever called a guy at midnight and said, I want to come over, and had him say yes? Carrie asked. Are there any who say no? The problem is that sex doesn't stay done, said Charlotte. She had a name for men who were fantastic lovers, sex gods, but even she was having trouble. Her most recent conquest was a poet who was terrific in bed, but who, she said, kept wanting me to go out to dinner with him and go through all the chat bit. He'd recently stopped calling. He wanted to read me his poetry, and I wouldn't let him. I guess it depends on the poetry. But I can't imagine turning down someone who wanted to take me out to dinner. I like dinner. Who doesn't like dinner? It's weird. All right. There's a thin line between attraction and repulsion, she continued, and usually the repulsion starts when they begin wanting you to treat them as people instead of sex toys. What a horrific thing to say. Oh my God. Don't treat people like sex toys. That's a bad thing. I asked if there was realistically any way to pull off this whole women having sex like men thing. You've got to be a real bitch, said Charlotte. Either that or you've got to be incredibly sweet and nice. We fall through the cracks. It confuses men. It's too late for sweet, Carrie said. Then I guess you're just going to have to become a bitch, Magda said. But I think Carrie's already a bitch. But there's one thing you forgot. What? Falling in love. I don't think so, Carrie said. She leaned back in her chair. She was wearing jeans and an old Yves Saint Laurent jacket. She sat like a man, legs apart. I'm going to do it. I'm going to become a real bitch. We looked at her and laughed. What's wrong? She asked. You're already a bitch. That's what I just said. Meeting Mr. Big. As part of her research, Carrie went to see The Last Seduction at 3 in the afternoon. She had heard that the movie portrayed a woman who, in pursuit of money and hot sex, and absolute control, uses and abuses every man she meets, and never has a regret or one of those expected, oh my God, what have I done, epiphanies. Carrie never goes to movies. She had a waspy mother who told her that only poor people with sick kids send their kids to the movie theater. So it was a big deal for her. She got to the theater late, and when the ticket taker told her the movie had already started, she said, "Fuck you, I'm here for research. You don't think I'd actually go see this movie, do you?" I do a lot of things for research, by the way. It's true. Journalism makes you do really weird research. I always tease that if my Google results were investigated, which I'm sure they would be by the FBI, I'm sure they already are on some list. I mean, I look like a serial killer. My my search results are probably just horrific. I go down so many rabbit holes that I wish I hadn't. In fact, the other day, and I shit you not, this happened to me. So I had been on a 4chan binge for a story that I was working on. It was actually for that TV thing I told you about that I was working on that got canceled because of a contract dispute. It was a true crime thing. So there were some dark holes to go down. And a lot of it was on 4chan and Kiwi farms. And I don't recommend that you go there unless you have to for work. And what I didn't know, I have a Mac. And so my Mac computer is real good about not getting viruses. I've never had one when I've had a Mac. And I remember so on when you're on 4chan, sometimes there are advertisements that pop up that are porn in the advertisement, like a banner that goes across the top and like it's moving porn. And I remember what it looked like. I remember this particular video because I had been staring at this page for a while, reading this stuff, and it was always playing on the top. And I never clicked on it. Well, I'm having memory problems with my computer, so I'm going through all the files, right? And I'm seeing, like, video files that I don't know what they are, and I have a lot of video files from doing these videos. So I'm clicking through each one, looking at the preview, and sure as shit, there is that same porn video that I never clicked on from 4chan that had somehow downloaded onto my computer. That makes me so scared, I cannot even tell you, like, I if that can happen where you can just be on a site and something is downloaded onto your computer, that's terrifying, especially as a journalist, because I go into some very dark places, and if something like that is on my computer, oh my god. Oh my god. So, I deleted it, of course, but it really scares me that that can even happen. Do any of you tech people know, how to protect your computer from stuff like that? I've never seen that happen before, ever, ever. So that scared the crap out of me. I hate that. If anybody knows how to protect against that, let me know because I need that. But I haven't had to go on 4chan for a while, so it should be okay. Stay off of 4chan, kids. It's terrifying. All right. Where were we? Oh yeah. When she came out, she kept thinking about the scene where Linda Fiorentino picks up the man and oh, I've never seen this movie, by the way. Have any of you seen this movie? I haven't seen it. Where Linda Fiorentino, I remember her though, picks up the man in the bar and has sex with him in the parking lot, gripping a chain link fence. Was that what it was all about? Carrie bought 2 pairs of strappy sandals and got her hair cut off. On a Sunday evening, Carrie went to a cocktail party thrown by the designer Jupe, one of those parties that should be in a movie, with everyone crowded in and the gay boys so lively, and even though Carrie had no work the next day, she knew she'd eventually have too many drinks and go home too late. Carrie doesn't like to go home at night, and she doesn't like to go to sleep. Mr. Jupe cleverly ran out of champagne halfway through the party, and people were banging on the kitchen door and begging the waiters for a glass of wine. A man walked by with a cigar in his mouth, and one of the men Carrie was talking to said, "Ooh, who's that again? He looks like a younger, better looking Ron Perlman." "I know who it is," Carrie said. "Who?" "Mr. Big." "I knew that. I always get Mr. Big and Perlman mixed up." "How much will you give me?" Carrie said. "How much will you give me if I go over and talk to him?" She does this new thing she's doing now with her short hair. She fluffs it up while the boys look at her and laugh. "You're crazy," they say. Carrie had seen Mr. Big once before, but she didn't think he'd remember her. She was in this office where she works sometimes, and Inside Edition was interviewing her about something she'd wrote about chihuahuas. You do find yourself getting interviewed about weird things when you're a journalist. I've been interviewed about some crazy stuff before, because I write about everything. Everything. There isn't anything that I don't write about, and sometimes I'll get calls from radio stations. I do a lot of radio hits where producers will call me and say, "Hey, we read your article on such and such. Do you wanna come on for a few minutes and talk about it?" And I'll go on. But I find myself talking about the craziest shit. This speaks to me. I know I've told you before that I identified with Carrie because our professions are similar, and it's true. Like, so already the weird stuff we do for research, the weird stuff we're interviewed about, it's it's never boring. I'll tell you that. It's never boring. But one day I can be interviewed about, transgender theory, and the next day I could be interviewed about chihuahuas. I mean, it could happen. Oh, dogs on death row. That's one. I did this fantastic story about 2 dogs on death row that we got off of death row. We saved them. You need to read it. It's fantastic. It's one of those stories that don't come along very often. My sister happened to be the lawyer on the case. It's freaking great. It was a great story. Great story. But this is why I identify with Carrie, because her life is so weird. So is mine. Oh. Mr. Big came in and started talking to the cameraman about how chihuahuas were all over Paris, and Carrie leaned over and tightened the lace on her boot. At the party, Mr. Big was sitting on the radiator in the living room. Oh, remember those? I had apartments with radiators. They were lovely. I love radiated heat. And in Chicago, when the winters are very dry, you can sometimes they have like a pan on top and you pour water in, and it's like a humidifier. Radiated heat is so wonderful. And the dog used to curl up next to the radiator. Mr. Big came in and started talking. Oh, whoops. At the party, he was sitting on the radiator in the living room. "Hi," Carrie said. "Remember me?" She could tell by his eyes that he had no idea who she was, and she wondered if he was going to panic. He twirled the cigar around the inside of his lips and took it out of his mouth. He looked away to flick his ash and then looked back at her. Abso-fucking-lutely. Another Mr. Big at Elaine's. Carrie didn't run into Mr. Big again for several days. In the meantime, something was definitely happening. She bumped into a writer friend she hadn't seen for 2 months. And he said, "What's going on with you? You look completely different." "I do? You look like Heather Locklear. Did you get your teeth fixed?" That's that thing. Okay, so this is interesting. This is funny. Do you guys remember a book called The Game by Neil Strauss years ago? If you haven't read that book, you need to read it. Maybe we'll read it here on book club. Um, it's about what do they call them? The pickup artists. The pickup artists who teach men how to pick up women. One of the things that they teach is the neg. And that's what Mr. Big just did to her. By insulting her about her teeth, he is giving her some negative feedback. And apparently, according to the pickup artist, this works on some women where they feel like they have to, I don't know, like get your attention even more because they said something negative. Frankly, I've always found it rude. It's funny, before I read the book, The Game, someone did this to me at a bar one time. And I remember thinking he was the biggest asshole, and then finding out later, like, oh, that's what he was trying to do. How sad. That was a bad pickup line. They train the guys to, like, the woman that they want to pick up, to talk to all the other women around her and ignore that woman. And then if they do talk to the woman they want to pick up, to neg her, to say something negative to her. So I was at this bar, and they also teach these guys to come up to women who have men with them and to just ignore the man at the table. This exact scenario happened to me once. I was, single in the city. We were at a bar in Chicago. I was with my best friend, the one who married the multimillionaire. She was sitting next to me, and across from us was our friend from high school, Richie, and we had met up at this bar to, hook up to, catch up because we haven't seen each other in a long time. And so we're having a fabulous time. We had ordered drinks and we're just talking, chatting. And this guy walks over to the table and we were sitting down like in a booth. It was like a place where you get food too. So it was really weird for someone to just walk up to a table where you're sitting. This guy walks up to the table and he starts just chatting us up. Starts talking to my best friend sitting next to me. And I'm looking at him like, dude, and she kept trying to like politely say, we're having drinks with a friend, so we can't talk right now. And I said something to him and he looks at me and he insulted my hair. I had like chunky highlights at the time and he was like, nice stripes or something like that. And I was like, what a dick. Like that's all we all thought, what a dick. And like my friend Rich is over, he's like, what is happening right now? So we had to finally I was like, "Hey, listen, get lost." And he turned around and left. Then a couple years later, I read the book and that scenario came back to me and I was like, "Was he trying to pick me up with that line? That was a terrible line. Don't do that to women," but I guess it works on some women. Clearly it worked on Carrie. So so he insults her about her teeth. Then she was at Elaine's and a big writer, a big one, someone she'd never met, gave her the finger and then sat down next to her and said, "You're not as tough as you think you are." Excuse me? You walk around like you're so fucking great in bed. She wanted to say, I do, but instead she laughed and said, well, maybe I am. He lit her cigarette. If I wanted to have an affair with you, it would have to last a long time. I wouldn't want a one night stand. Well, baby, she said, you've got the wrong girl. Then she went to a party after one of those Peggy Segal movie openings and ran into a big movie producer, another big one, and he gave her a ride in his car to Bowery Bar. But Mr. Big was there. Mr. Big slid into the banquet next to her. Their sides were touching. Mr. Big said, so, what have you been doing lately? Besides going out every night? Yeah, what do you do for work? This is my work, she said. I'm researching a story for a friend of mine about women who have sex like men. You know, they have sex and afterwards they feel nothing. I will say that's one of the benefits of writing for a living. You do get to do research in fun places depending on what you're researching. A lot of my research takes place in courtrooms. I like going to courtrooms. I like sitting in on what's going on in court. I always find that exciting and fun. One time I sat in on a murder trial. It was horrifying, sad, especially with the family there. Ugh. But I mean, I find that interesting. Um, Mr. Big eyed her. But you're not like that, he said. Are you? She asked. Not a drop, not even half a drop, he said. Carrie looked at Mr. Big. What's wrong with you? Oh, I get it, said Mr. Big. You've never been in love. Oh, yeah? Yeah. And you have? Abso-fucking-lutely. They went back to his apartment. Mr. Big opened a bottle of Cristal champagne. Carrie was laughing and carrying on, and then she said, I have to go. It's 4 a.m., he said. He stood up. I'm not going to let you go home now. He gave her a t-shirt and boxer shorts. He went into the bathroom while she changed. She got into the bed and lay back against the down pillows. She closed her eyes. His bed was so comfortable. It was the most comfortable bed she'd been in her whole life. When he came back into the bedroom, she was sound asleep. And that's the end of chapter 6. So, it's different than the way that they had them meet. Well, sort of. I mean, some of the dialogue is the same, I recognized. But the sleepover, the platonic sleepover did not happen in the Sex and the City series. So that's interesting, but it appears they did know each other for a while before the dating began. So that's fun. All right, well, I think we're done with chapter 6. What's chapter 7? Let me see what comes up with chapter 7. Chapter 7, oh, the International Crazy Girls. So do you remember that one? That was a great episode. That was one of the best. The one where Carrie's friend from Italy comes and takes her out with all these. She's a party girl and takes her out with all the rich guys who come over from Europe or whatever. And they're basically like call girls. But they're looking, these guys are looking for girls to party with in the city when they're in town. So that should be interesting. That should be fun. Well, it's time to get going. I hope you enjoyed today's book club chapter, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. Have a great evening. Have a great Friday night.